The quickest way to discover real leadership is to watch who remains standing after pride asks them to leave. Morning sunlight poured through the towering glass walls of Hayes Technologies headquarters, casting long reflections across the polished marble floor as executives hurried toward the largest boardroom in the building. The quiet rhythm of expensive shoes echoed through the hallway while assistants balanced tablets, coffee cups, and thick presentation folders carrying decisions worth billions of dollars. Ryan Foster stepped off the elevator wearing a neatly pressed charcoal suit that had served him faithfully for years. His leather briefcase showed faint signs of age, but every document inside had been carefully organized the night before after his 8-year-old daughter Emma had fallen asleep. Before leaving home that morning, she had slipped a folded note into his briefcase without him noticing. Ryan paused outside the boardroom, straightened his tie, and quietly greeted every employee he passed. The receptionist smiled warmly. The maintenance worker nodded with genuine respect. Even the security guard wished him good luck before opening the heavy walnut doors leading into the executive conference room. Inside, sunlight illuminated a massive oval table surrounded by senior directors, legal advisors, and department heads. At the far end sat Lauren Hayes, the 28-year-old chief executive officer whose calm confidence had quickly earned admiration throughout the business world. Her tailored ivory business dress reflected the understated elegance expected of someone responsible for thousands of employees. A large digital screen displayed financial projections, while several shareholders joined remotely through live video connections. Ryan walked toward the presentation podium carrying months of research that explained how the company's newest technology platform could avoid a costly strategic mistake. Before he reached the center of the room, Lauren looked up from the report in front of her. "Mr. Foster," she said evenly, "this meeting is reserved for executive leadership." Ryan stopped respectfully. "I understand, but the engineering committee asked me to present the final system review." Lauren glanced briefly toward another executive before returning her attention to him. "That review has already been summarized." Ryan remained calm. "There is one detail the summary does not include." Several board members exchanged uncertain glances. Lauren folded her hands together. "We have shareholders waiting. We do not have time for additional discussions." Ryan politely held up the slim folder in his hand. "It will only take 5 minutes." The room became completely still. Lauren took a slow breath before speaking words that seemed to freeze the air itself. "Get out of my boardroom." No one moved. No one spoke. Ryan quietly looked around the table, meeting the eyes of several executives who clearly recognized both his experience and his integrity. Yet none of them interrupted the chief executive officer. Ryan simply nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." Without another word, he closed the presentation folder, thanked the assistant who had prepared the projector, and walked calmly toward the exit. As the heavy doors closed behind him, the quiet sound echoed through the room far louder than anyone expected. Ryan did not look back. He walked down the hallway with the same steady pace he had entered, greeted the receptionist once more, and pressed the elevator button. Inside the boardroom, Lauren opened the first shareholder presentation with composed professionalism. The opening financial reports proceeded smoothly until the chairman of the largest investment group leaned toward his microphone. "Before we vote," he said, "I have one technical question regarding the platform architecture." Lauren smiled confidently. "Of course." The chairman adjusted his glasses before continuing. "Our independent auditors mentioned an engineering concern that only one employee has been able to explain clearly during every previous review." He looked down at his notes, then back toward the board. "Where is Ryan Foster?" Silence settled across the boardroom after the chairman asked the question no one expected to hear. Lauren looked toward the empty chair Ryan had occupied only minutes earlier, then calmly answered, "He is no longer participating in this meeting." The chairman frowned slightly. "Was that your decision?" Lauren held his gaze without hesitation. "Yes." Several shareholders exchanged quiet glances on the large video screens lining the conference room wall. Another investor leaned toward his microphone. "That is unfortunate." Lauren remained composed. "May I ask why?" The investor opened a thick binder resting beside him. "Because every independent review over the past 3 years references one engineer by name whenever the discussion reaches system resilience." Ryan Foster. Lauren looked toward her executive team. None of them spoke. She continued presenting quarterly growth projections, market expansion plans, and long-term financial forecasts. Yet every few minutes another shareholder returned to the same subject. Who validated the architecture? Who designed the recovery model? Who approved the infrastructure safeguards? Each answer eventually circled back to Ryan's department. Lauren noticed the confidence she had carried into the meeting slowly giving way to something unfamiliar. Not fear, but uncertainty. Meanwhile, Ryan stepped out into the bright morning air, the cool breeze carrying away the tension he had quietly left behind. He unlocked his pickup truck, placed his unopened presentation folder on the passenger seat, and finally noticed the folded paper tucked inside his briefcase. Smiling softly, he opened Emma's handwritten note. "Good luck today, Daddy. Even if nobody listens, always tell the truth because the right people hear it eventually." Ryan folded the note carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket before starting the engine. Instead of driving home, he headed toward Emma's elementary school, arriving just as students began their morning recess. He stood outside the fence for a moment, watching children laugh beneath the spring sunshine. Emma spotted him almost immediately and waved enthusiastically across the playground. Her teacher smiled and walked over. "Everything all right?" Ryan nodded warmly. "Better than all right. I just wanted to see her smile before going back to work." The teacher laughed softly. "She talks about you every day." Ryan watched Emma helping another little girl gather books that had slipped from her backpack after a gust of wind scattered them across the sidewalk. Without being asked, Emma knelt beside her classmate, collecting every notebook before handing them back with a cheerful smile. Ryan quietly lowered his eyes. Her mother would have been proud. Back at headquarters, the atmosphere inside the boardroom had changed completely. A senior shareholder placed a confidential engineering audit onto the conference table. "Before we approve this investment," he said calmly, "we require clarification regarding the system migration scheduled for next quarter." Lauren opened the report, her confidence fading as technical diagrams covered every page. She recognized the terminology, but not the deeper engineering assumptions behind it. She turned toward the chief technology officer. "Can you explain the dependency model?" He hesitated. "Ryan developed it." Another executive cleared his throat. "Only Ryan has presented the complete architecture to the regulators." The chairman slowly removed his glasses. "Then why is the one person who understands the system not sitting in this room?" No one answered. Lauren quietly looked toward the closed walnut doors. For the first time since becoming chief executive officer, she realized the empty chair beside the presentation screen carried more weight than every occupied seat surrounding the table. And somewhere in the parking lot, Ryan's unopened folder still contained the single 5-minute explanation that could determine the future of the entire company. Ryan spent the remainder of the morning exactly where everyone expected an ordinary engineer to be, inside the quiet development laboratory tucked behind the main production building. Rows of prototype servers hummed steadily while diagnostic screens displayed thousands of lines of system data, flowing without interruption. He placed his unopened presentation folder on the corner of his desk and calmly resumed reviewing overnight performance reports as though nothing unusual had happened. His coworkers glanced toward him with concern, but Ryan greeted each of them with the same steady smile he wore every morning. No bitterness reached his voice. No complaint escaped his lips. He simply continued helping a junior engineer solve a software issue before quietly reminding another employee to take a lunch break after working through the night. Several technicians exchanged puzzled looks. One finally asked, "Did the board meeting go well?" Ryan smiled gently. "The company still needs good work today. That part has not changed." Hundreds of yards away, the atmosphere inside the executive boardroom had become increasingly tense. Shareholders no longer discussed quarterly profits. Every question focused on technical stability, long-term reliability, and the architecture supporting the company's largest government contract. Lauren answered every business concern with confidence, yet each engineering question seemed to circle back to the same missing name. Finally, the chairman placed a thick, confidential report in the center of the table. "This document was prepared by independent auditors 6 months ago," he said calmly. "Please turn to page 38. Lauren opened the report and immediately noticed an entire section highlighted in blue. At the top appeared a single sentence. "Critical infrastructure knowledge currently resides primarily with senior systems engineer Ryan Foster." A second sentence followed beneath it. Company continuity depends upon preserving his institutional knowledge. Lauren slowly looked up from the page. Why was this never presented during executive review? The chief technology officer shifted uncomfortably. It was included. Lauren frowned. I never received it. The room fell silent. The chairman quietly answered before anyone else could speak. Because your predecessor instructed legal counsel to remove that page from executive briefing packets. Lauren stared at him in disbelief. Why? An elderly shareholder who had served on the board for decades quietly folded his hands. Because your predecessor believed no employee should ever become more valuable than executive leadership. Lauren lowered her eyes toward the report once again. Suddenly, the empty chair beside the presentation screen seemed less like a personnel decision and more like the center of a much older story. At that same moment, Ryan opened his presentation folder for the first time since leaving the boardroom. Inside rested detailed engineering diagrams exactly where he had left them. As he reached for the first page, another envelope unexpectedly slipped from a hidden pocket inside the folder and landed gently on his desk. He frowned. The envelope looked decades older than everything else inside. Across the front, written in faded blue ink with handwriting he recognized immediately, appeared his late father's name followed by 6 carefully printed words. Give this only to the board. Ryan sat perfectly still. He had carried the folder for years without ever discovering the hidden compartment. Slowly, he turned the envelope over. The wax seal remained completely intact. On the back, his father had written one final instruction. Do not open unless they finally ask for you by name. Ryan quietly closed his eyes, remembering his father's familiar voice reminding him that patience often reveals truths that force never can. At headquarters, Lauren stood beside the conference table preparing to call Ryan back, unaware that the sealed envelope resting inside his hands had been waiting for this exact moment for more than 25 years. Ryan remained seated at his workstation for several quiet minutes, holding the sealed envelope without breaking the faded wax. The handwriting belonged unmistakably to his late father, yet the instruction was equally clear. The envelope did not belong to him. It belonged to the board. He carefully placed it inside his leather briefcase beside the presentation folder before returning to the system diagnostics that continued scrolling across his monitor. Around him, engineers moved calmly between workstations, discussing software updates and performance reports as though the morning's events had never happened. Ryan answered every question with patience, reviewed every line of code with the same quiet discipline, and thanked a young technician who brought him a fresh cup of coffee. No one watching him would have guessed that the future of the company now rested only a few feet away inside a weathered leather briefcase. Across the campus, the atmosphere inside the executive boardroom had changed dramatically. Lauren no longer stood with the confidence she had carried into the meeting. Instead, she quietly reviewed document after document that seemed to reveal a version of the company she had never been allowed to see. The chairman slid another archive folder across the polished table. Before you became chief executive officer, he said gently, there were several executive decisions your predecessor believed should remain confidential. Lauren opened the folder and found dozens of engineering reports bearing Ryan's signature. Each report documented a different crisis that had been resolved quietly over the previous 7 years. One prevented a nationwide service interruption. Another protected sensitive customer data during an unexpected systems failure. A third outlined the redesign of the company's entire security architecture after an external vendor unexpectedly collapsed. Every report ended the same way. Recommendation accepted. Public recognition declined by employee request. Lauren looked toward the chief technology officer. Why was none of this discussed during leadership transition? He lowered his eyes. Ryan never wanted credit. He always said solving the problem mattered more than receiving applause. The oldest shareholder smiled sadly. Your predecessor appreciated that answer far more than he deserved. Lauren slowly closed the folder, realizing that the engineer she had dismissed only hours earlier had quietly protected the company's reputation for years without asking for a promotion, a bonus, or public recognition. At that moment, the elderly receptionist gently knocked on the boardroom door. She stepped inside carrying a small wooden box that had been kept in the executive records office for decades. I believe this belongs in today's meeting, she said softly. Lauren accepted the box with curiosity. Inside rested a brass employee identification badge, so old its photograph had nearly faded away. The name beneath it read Samuel Foster, Ryan's father. Tucked beneath the badge lay a handwritten memorandum signed by the company's founder. Lauren carefully unfolded the page. Samuel Foster possesses the rare ability to prevent conflict before it begins. Protect his judgment even when titles disagree with him. She looked up in surprise. Ryan's father worked here? The chairman nodded slowly. Long before any of us sat at this table. Lauren traced the worn edges of the old badge with thoughtful fingers. Then why did he leave? No one answered immediately. Finally, the receptionist spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. He did not leave because the company failed him. He left because someone in this room failed him. Silence filled the boardroom once again. Hundreds of yards away, Ryan received a polite phone call requesting his immediate return to headquarters. He thanked the caller, closed his laptop, and picked up his briefcase. As he reached the parking lot, sunlight reflected across the brass clasp, revealing tiny engraved initials he had somehow never noticed before. SF. Beneath them appeared one sentence, almost invisible with age. The second key has always traveled with the first. Ryan drove back toward headquarters beneath a bright afternoon sky, his leather briefcase resting quietly on the passenger seat. Every traffic light seemed strangely unhurried, giving him time to think not about the board meeting but about his father. Samuel Foster had rarely spoken about his years at Hayes Technologies. He always said that a person's greatest work should continue long after their name disappeared from the door. Ryan had never fully understood those words until now. As he entered the executive parking garage, several employees who recognized him offered respectful greetings. He smiled, thanked each of them, and continued toward the elevator with the same quiet confidence he had carried into the building that morning. Upstairs, the atmosphere inside the boardroom had changed completely. The polished conference table remained covered with financial reports, engineering diagrams, and historical documents, but no one discussed quarterly earnings anymore. Lauren stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows holding Samuel Foster's old employee badge, silently reflecting on everything she had learned over the past few hours. The chairman approached her calmly. Leadership becomes much heavier when history finally introduces itself. Lauren nodded softly. I asked someone to leave before I understood why he had been invited. The chairman smiled gently. That realization already makes you a better leader than many who have sat in this room. A quiet knock interrupted their conversation. Ryan stepped through the open doorway carrying his briefcase. Every voice in the room faded into respectful silence. Lauren walked toward him herself rather than asking an assistant to do it. Mr. Foster, she said sincerely, thank you for returning. Ryan answered with the same calm politeness. You asked for me by name. Those simple words caused several longtime shareholders to exchange thoughtful glances, remembering the instruction written on the sealed envelope he still carried. Lauren lowered her eyes briefly before speaking again. I owe you an apology. Ryan gently shook his head. The company has more important things to solve today. She looked directly at him. That is exactly why I am apologizing. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The afternoon sunlight reflected across the empty chair Ryan had occupied earlier, quietly reminding everyone how quickly assumptions could change. Lauren stepped aside and gestured toward the presentation podium. The floor is yours, if you are still willing. Ryan placed his presentation folder on the table, but did not open it immediately. Instead, he removed the weathered envelope hidden inside his briefcase and carefully laid it beside the engineering reports. Before we discuss the system, he said quietly, my father left instructions that this should be delivered only after the board requested me by name. The chairman slowly stood. His expression changed the instant he recognized Samuel Foster's handwriting. I have been waiting many years to see that envelope. Ryan slid it across the polished table without opening it. It belongs to all of you. Lauren looked at the faded wax seal with growing curiosity. You never opened it? Ryan smiled softly. My father trusted that the right moment would arrive. I trusted him. The chairman carefully accepted the envelope with both hands. Before breaking the seal, he turned it over and noticed another sentence written beneath the flap, one almost hidden by age. His face grew unexpectedly pale. He quietly read the words a second time before looking toward Ryan with unmistakable astonishment. Then he whispered so softly that only Lauren, sitting closest to him, could hear. Samuel did not leave us a letter. He looked toward the entire boardroom before finishing the sentence. He left us the legal proof that this company has been honoring the wrong promise for 25 years. The chairman held the unopened envelope with both hands for several silent moments before carefully breaking the aging wax seal. No one in the boardroom reached for a phone or a laptop. Even the shareholders attending through video conference leaned closer to their screens, sensing that whatever rested inside the envelope carried far greater importance than the quarterly reports scattered across the polished table. The chairman slowly unfolded several yellowed pages and immediately recognized the signature at the bottom. It belonged to the company's founder. He quietly adjusted his glasses before reading the opening lines aloud. If this letter is being opened, then Samuel Foster's son has already been invited back into this room by the board itself. If that has happened, it means the company has finally learned the lesson Samuel hoped it would never have to learn the difficult way. Complete silence settled across the room. Lauren looked toward Ryan, whose calm expression never changed. He had not opened the envelope because he believed promises deserved to arrive exactly when they were intended. The chairman continued reading. Samuel refused every executive position I offered him. He believed leaders should never become dependent upon one individual. Instead, they should build systems that help ordinary people become extraordinary together. I disagreed with him. Years later, I realized he had been right. Several longtime shareholders quietly lowered their eyes. The chairman turned another page. If the board is reading this because only Samuel's family can explain a crisis, then somewhere along the way we have mistaken titles for wisdom. Correct that mistake before you ask anyone else to solve it. Lauren felt those words settle deeply inside her heart. She slowly stood and faced the entire board. The mistake was mine, she said honestly. I judged who belonged in this room before I understood why he had been invited. No one interrupted her. The room respected the courage required to admit failure more than any polished presentation. Ryan gently shook his head. Today is not about assigning blame. Lauren looked toward him. Then what is it about? Ryan answered softly. Protecting the people who trust this company. Those simple words reminded every executive why they had entered business in the first place. The chairman smiled quietly before sliding the engineering reports toward Ryan. Mr. Foster, would you help us understand what the shareholders have been asking all morning? Ryan opened the presentation folder he had carried since dawn. He calmly connected his laptop to the projector and displayed the first system diagram. Within minutes, the complicated technical questions that had confused the room throughout the day became surprisingly clear. He explained every dependency, every safeguard, and every long-term solution with patience instead of pride. Whenever a shareholder interrupted with another question, Ryan answered respectfully, never once mentioning the morning's humiliation. As the final slide disappeared, the chairman slowly closed his notebook. That, he said with genuine admiration, is the clearest technical presentation this board has received in years. Quiet agreement spread throughout the room. Lauren looked at Ryan with growing respect, realizing the strongest voice in the building had never needed to become the loudest. Just as the tension finally began to ease, the company's legal counsel hurried into the boardroom, carrying an old archive binder recently retrieved from secure storage. I believe this belongs with Samuel's letter, she said. Inside the binder rested an original board resolution signed 25 years earlier. At the very bottom, beneath every executive signature, appeared one final handwritten instruction from the founder that no one remembered approving. When the Foster family returns, give them the second document before any vote is taken. The legal counsel turned one more page, but the protective sleeve that should have contained the second document was completely empty. The empty protective sleeve rested inside the archive binder like a question no one in the room could answer. The chairman carefully turned each remaining page, hoping the missing document had simply been filed in the wrong place, but every divider beyond it remained empty. Lauren looked around the boardroom, reading the same concern on every face. If the founder expected us to receive a second document, she asked quietly, where could it have gone? The legal counsel slowly closed the binder. The archive inventory shows it existed 25 years ago. After that, there is no record. Ryan remained thoughtful rather than alarmed. My father always believed important things rarely disappear by accident. The chairman nodded. Samuel said that more than once. Ryan reached for his leather briefcase. resting one hand on the worn handle as though trying to remember something almost forgotten. His fingers paused when they brushed against the small brass initials engraved near the clasp. SF. He slowly opened the briefcase and removed every folder one by one. Engineering reports. Project diagrams. Emma's folded drawing. His notebook. At the very bottom lay a thin leather divider he had never noticed before. It seemed thicker than the others. Ryan gently pressed along the stitching until he felt a narrow ridge hidden beneath the lining. There is something inside. The room fell completely silent. Using the edge of an old letter opener resting on the conference table, he carefully lifted a concealed flap built into the leather decades earlier. A folded cream-colored document slowly slid into his hand. The paper had aged, but the company seal remained perfectly preserved. Lauren looked toward the chairman in astonishment. Could this be it? Ryan carefully turned the document over. Across the front appeared the founder's unmistakable handwriting. Second document. Deliver only after the first promise is honored. The chairman smiled softly. Samuel carried it exactly as he was asked. Ryan handed the document to Lauren before anyone else. She hesitated. Should I open it? Ryan answered with quiet certainty. You are the chief executive officer. My father trusted the company. Today the company trusts you. Lauren slowly unfolded the document. It was neither a contract nor a financial agreement. It was a handwritten covenant signed jointly by the founder and Samuel Foster. Together they had pledged that no future leader of Hayes Technologies would ever evaluate an employee solely by title, position, education, or appearance. Every executive would first be measured by character, humility, and service to others. Beneath the covenant appeared one final paragraph. If this document is discovered because someone was dismissed before being heard, the company must correct the mistake publicly before conducting any further business. Lauren quietly lowered the pages. She looked toward every shareholder joining remotely before standing beside Ryan. Then we will honor that promise now. Without hesitation, she addressed the entire board. This morning I asked Ryan Foster to leave this room before listening to him. That decision failed both him and the values this company was built upon. I publicly withdraw that decision and formally recognize his contribution before every shareholder present today. No applause followed immediately. Instead, the room remained peacefully silent, the kind of silence created only when pride finally stepped aside to make room for truth. The chairman gently smiled. Now we may continue. Just then, the elderly receptionist quietly entered carrying a small cedar box she had discovered inside the founder's private office while searching for additional archive records. She placed it before Ryan. Attached to the lid was a faded tag written decades earlier in Samuel Foster's handwriting. Open this only after the board chooses respect before authority. Ryan looked at the small cedar box without reaching for it immediately. The faded handwriting across the tag belonged unmistakably to his father, and for a brief moment the busy boardroom faded into complete silence. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows, resting gently across the polished wood as though even time itself had slowed to witness the final promise unfold. Lauren quietly stepped beside him. Would you like to open it? Ryan smiled softly. My father always believed some things should never be opened alone. The chairman nodded in agreement. Then let this board witness what Samuel wanted us to remember. Ryan carefully lifted the cedar lid. Inside rested a neatly folded journal wrapped in blue linen, an old brass compass, and a single envelope bearing the company founder's signature. Beneath them lay a small framed photograph protected by clear glass. Ryan picked up the photograph first. It showed his father and the company's founder standing together beside the unfinished headquarters decades earlier. Between them stood a little girl no older than 7, smiling while holding a tiny wooden toolbox Samuel had built especially for her. Lauren leaned closer, her expression slowly changing. That little girl. The elderly receptionist smiled gently before answering. That was your mother. Lauren looked at the photograph in complete surprise. My mother never told me she knew Samuel Foster. The receptionist nodded. She did more than know him. Every Saturday, she followed him around the construction site asking endless questions because she dreamed of building things that helped people. Ryan carefully turned the photograph over. Samuel had written one sentence across the back in careful blue ink. She reminds me that leaders are first taught by kindness, long before they are taught by business. Lauren quietly covered her mouth, remembering how her mother had always told her to greet every employee before beginning any meeting, a lesson she had gradually forgotten beneath years of responsibility. Ryan then opened the journal. Instead of financial records or technical drawings, every page contained handwritten stories about employees whose quiet acts of integrity had strengthened the company. Janitors who stayed overnight after storms. Receptionists who comforted frightened visitors. Engineers who admitted mistakes before anyone discovered them. None of them had received awards. Yet Samuel believed they represented the true foundation of Hayes Technologies. The final page contained one sentence underlined twice. If executives ever become more important than these people, rebuild the company before expanding it. The room remained perfectly still. Lauren slowly looked around the boardroom, seeing every assistant, technician, receptionist, and support employee in a completely different light. She turned toward the shareholders attending by video. I would like to propose our first vote of the afternoon. The chairman smiled. Please proceed. Lauren spoke with quiet conviction. I move that every employee, regardless of title, receive the same opportunity to present ideas directly to executive leadership through a new leadership council named in honor of Samuel Foster. Before anyone could respond, every shareholder raised a hand in unanimous approval. Ryan quietly lowered his eyes, grateful not because his father was finally being remembered, but because the values Samuel had lived by would now belong to thousands of families instead of one. As the meeting drew peacefully toward its conclusion, the chairman finally opened the last unopened envelope resting inside the cedar box. A small brass key slipped gently onto the table along with one handwritten note from the founder. He read the words aloud in a voice filled with quiet emotion. When this day finally arrives, unlock the founder's desk. The last answer has been waiting there beside Emma's name since the week she was born. Ryan stared at the note in complete silence because no one in the room had ever told the founder about his daughter, and the founder had passed away many years before Emma entered the world. 1 year later, the atmosphere inside Hayes Technologies felt remarkably different from the morning when silence had followed a single command. The executive floor no longer belonged only to titles and reserved offices. Every month, employees from every department gathered around the same boardroom table to present ideas, concerns, and solutions directly to leadership. Maintenance workers, software engineers, receptionists, interns, and senior executives now spoke with equal respect because the Samuel Foster Leadership Council had become the living heart of the company. Ryan never accepted an executive title despite repeated requests from the board. Instead, he chose to remain chief systems architect, believing that the strongest leaders spent more time building people than building resumes. Every afternoon, without fail, he still left the office in time to pick up Emma from school. Lauren often watched from her office window as father and daughter walked across the parking lot laughing together before driving home. She had learned that success measured in quarterly reports always faded, but moments like those never did. One autumn morning, the chairman invited the board to gather once more around the founder's restored oak desk. The small brass key discovered inside the cedar box fit perfectly into a hidden drawer that had remained locked for decades. Ryan quietly stepped back, allowing Lauren to unlock it herself. Inside rested only one leather-bound journal, a sealed envelope, and a tiny silver compass polished so carefully it still reflected the morning sunlight. Lauren opened the journal first. Instead of business strategies or financial forecasts, every page contained handwritten observations about ordinary employees whose quiet integrity had shaped extraordinary outcomes. On the final page, the founder had written a simple sentence. The future of this company will never be protected by the smartest person in the room. It will always be protected by the kindest. No one spoke. The room seemed to breathe more slowly as those words settled into every heart. Ryan then handed Lauren the final envelope. Across the front appeared only 3 words. Open together always. They unfolded the letter side by side. It explained that the founder had created the company with a single purpose beyond profit, to build a workplace where character would one day matter more than authority. Attached to the letter was a certificate transferring a small block of founder shares into a permanent employee trust, ensuring that every future generation of workers would own part of the company they helped build. The shareholders unanimously approved the founder's final wish without hesitation. As the meeting concluded, Emma arrived after school carrying a science project she could not wait to show her father. She proudly placed it on the old oak desk, accidentally nudging the silver compass resting beside the journal. The compass shifted slightly, revealing a shallow engraving hidden beneath its base. Ryan carefully lifted it. Carved into the wood were initials that belonged neither to the founder nor to Samuel Foster. The elderly receptionist quietly smiled through unexpected tears. I wondered when someone would finally notice. She reached into the archive box and removed an old photograph no one had examined closely before. Turning it over, she revealed one final handwritten note dated more than 30 years earlier. To my daughter, Evelyn Hayes. If you ever have a child of your own, teach her to trust Samuel Foster's family. One day, they will protect not only our company, but your future as well. Lauren stared silently at the signature beneath the message. It belonged to her late grandfather, the company's founder. Then she looked back at Ryan, finally understanding that long before either of them had been born, two families had made a promise neither generation remembered, yet both had unknowingly spent their entire lives keeping.